I'm gonna get into the show portion of this, which the format have broken slightly recently, but I'm probably gonna like chug through the recap pretty fast. Um, and then not like talk to chat too much during the recap, except maybe like I'll catch up a little bit in certain points or like pick out highlights. Um, and then after that, I'll go into the DM prep part, and then we'll like we can chat a little more casually and at more length. So, you guys, some of you will remember that we took care of some werewolf stuff, some werewolf shenanigans. This session started out. I kind of figured this would happen this way. Where like they were kind of deliberating, taking a long time to go over it at the end of last session, and I was like, I bet if we take a break, I bet if we cut it here, like not only is this a good time to cut it after this combat is over, but like next week they'll move it along a little bit. They'll move past this like logical loop that they're going in. And that happened. They're just like, all right, so we were planning on we're just gonna send these guys with a note from us, right? And I was like, yep, that sounds good. And so that's what they did. They sent off the werewolf, the friendly werewolf of the Moon Revel clan, I believe, is the kind of temporary, tentative name for that. Until the name is flexible until I give it to a player. So sent them off to Eden to meet up with their priest of Denala, not friend, but acquaintance, who may or may not want some recompense for helping out the villagers. But yeah, the villagers were cursed by evil werewolf Devilman, and will transform at the next full moon if their curse is not broken. And the players decided that feeding them Wolfsbane that would deal like 12d6 and then 20d6 and then some crazy amount of d6 damage before it cured them was maybe not the best plan. So they came up with this alternative of have the werewolf bring them to Eden. They'll get cured there, and then they'll deal with whatever this cleric wants once they get there. And from there, they headed up this way. They have a mission to check out some questionable cartographers who were like kind of strangers in this area. There was a group here and a group here, and they were like said to be mapping out. One, they seemed to be suspicious by whatever metrics the guards of Eden used. Like the reports seemed like they were up to no good, and they were like, they had stuff like telescopes and whatever. They were scouting out this area and this area, and so there was concern, and the players were headed there to check that out. They got as far as this channel here before they ran into a little blockade. There was like a wall of ice that they ran. They didn't run into it in the physical sense, but it halted their progress. So I guess you could say the mappers were sketchy. That is very true. So yeah, they were blocked by like this ice wall, and some ice methods popped up, and they were like, "Hey, we're like taking a toll to let people through here. We're like doing God's work, keeping this area clean for you, to keep your travels relaxed and not be perturbed by bandits and such. Aren't we great? Give us 100 gold." And the party was like, I don't think so. That's a lot of gold. We're like, we don't have that on us. Can we like talk about something less? And they rolled like some kind of negotiation, and the method was like, yo, I mean, I'm not really like, this isn't really my like, it's not. I'm like an employee basically. So let me get the boss, and I'll be right back. And he went off. Player tried to like break through the ice while he was gone. Another method popped up and was like, "Hey, don't do that. No, you're not going to be able to break through it anyway. Just relax. We're getting the boss to talk. Please be patient." And then like this hooded elf comes back. And he's like, "Hey, I heard you have trouble paying the toll." And they were like, "Yeah, we don't have 100 gold. We have like we just came from back there. We were already robbed. Like, we don't have anything on us." And the sorcerer was like looks at the method, looks back, he's like, how much you got? And they rolled like a critical They rolled a natural 20 on their deception check, got a critical success, and said, 10 gold is all we got. Or, basically 10 gold is all they have. Uh, and so the guy, like, slaps the mephit over the head. It's like, all right, fine. 10 gold is fine. Uh, they come back and they're like, how about 100 silver? Like, we don't actually have it in gold. Is that okay? And he's like, yeah, whatever. Just, you're like, you have anything to transport it in? And the mephit goes over. And they're like, yeah, we have this. They had a broken, like, mandolin for some reason. I don't remember why. Like, something to do with Solus the Bard. So they're really playing up the, like, we're broke thing, which kind of makes sense with their, like, they have, like, shredded up, bloodied clothes. Like, they look the part right now because of the werewolf combat. So they put the 100 silver in this broken mandolin, give it to him, and he drops the wall, and they can go on their way. So that didn't go exactly like I expected. I kind of expected someone to just, like, throw a dagger or soundburst him instead of the wall or something like that. That just didn't happen. My players surprised me there with their they did a little. The bard was like, hey, I think I've heard of this guy. He did, like, a bardic lore check and was like, yeah, this guy's been, like, he's chilling in a nearby village, and he's actually been, like, paid by them to, like, stop thieves and stuff. The way you talk about your party made them sound like the shoot first kind of guys. Yeah, usually they are. I guess when the enemy is out of arm's reach, it's a little bit different. They've got a little more poise. So this sorcerer has been taking care of thieves and bandits near here, and so the party was like, let's like bring him, let's haggle him down, and then we'll move on. And they succeeded at that. So then they proceeded to move up to this circle, and they stopped in this hex. They found the cartographers could be anywhere in this circle. So there were some, like, skill checks involved. First, they, like, just picked a direction. They looked for any signs of anything, and they found a camp here on shore. They checked that out. They were traveling around by boat, so this didn't really tell them where to go. But, I said the boat was parked roughly this way. You see the sign that the boat was there, and has taken off in the last couple of days. It hasn't been more than a week. Still fairly fresh. You can see the occasional boot print and such, even, like, near the shore where, normally it'd get washed away. So the party took a chunk of the day to travel up the hill. These are, like, fjords, so, like, as you go inward, it's pretty sharp inclines. Party went up the hill to, like, get a better vantage point, see what see if they could see anything. They saw smoke coming from this direction, like, straight over here. So they were like, oh, okay, well, someone's setting up camp over there. They also found, like, a work site for the cartographers, and they were like, all right, let's take a minute to look around. What could they see from here? So they got kind of, like, the viewing angle, which covered, like, down here and, like, this, basically. Like, very good, very wide vantage point. So they had that information. And then they proceeded over this way, made another skill check the next day to, like, see if they could triangulate where the smoke was, which was very smart instead of getting the individual line. And they found out that the camp was right here. They pinpointed it, parked their boat here for the night to avoid, like, the sight lines from inside that cove. And yeah, then they were headed on their approach to meet up with the cartographers. What would you do if the party said they would work for the coin? Oh yeah, we would figure that out. I don't have a you'd be like, okay, yeah, sure. Well, like, what would probably happen is I would just spitball, like, all right, well, there's a group of bandits over, like, a day west. Like, let's get in your boat. Let's head over there. Let's take out these bandits, and then we'll get on through let you on through the channel. So that's how that probably would have went. Like, it just would have been something off the top of my head like that. Yeah, so next day, cruised over to this little this beach in their boat. They found the camp. It was like right on shore. They didn't have to work too hard to find it. And they just kind of approached. They're like, we're here on official business from the Green Stags, the guards of Eden, like the town guard. So like, we don't really have to, you know, we don't have to be covert about this. We're just gonna walk up and ask them what's going on. With an asterisk of, they sent the rogue on shore ahead, with a potion of invisibility that you'll remember they got from, the end of the last adventure. After the fight with Explicita Defilis, they found a couple potions of invisibility in the chest. The alchemist was able to kind of identify them. He rolled pretty well on his craft check for that one, so he's able to like make a couple every day, which is pretty sweet. Really powerful, but like it's something I like really powerful. I like giving players these options. It's fine. And he has to make them at like the start of the day, or I believe the alchemist works like they can make 2 at the start of the day for like a single slot, or if they make it during the day on the fly, they only make 1 of the potion or whatever it is. So it's, it gives them another tool without being like, yeah, you can just be ready for any situation. Like at the drop of a hat, you need to plan ahead if you need to turn the entire party invisible or what have you, or like an entire group of prisoners, or it's not a fix-all tool. So they moseyed up, started talking to these cartographers, asked them what they were doing, and they were like, yeah, we were hired to like update some maps around here. Check out these shipping lanes. We want, he just said there's a town like all the way through here, which is true. There's like a town of like dwarves and halflings and some folks like living with some of these weird new gods we've been hearing about, these new deities. Like they're just living in town with them, and population's growing, so we're checking out shipping lanes to see how far bigger ships can get before we have to drop off and swap to smaller vessels or what have you. And the party was like, oh, okay, well that makes sense. They rolled the check to see if these guys were lying, and they did not they didn't come up with any falsities with their rolls. But meanwhile, Eve stole like this bag of maps and just kind of snuck away with them. And that's what these marks are. So they regrouped at the boat after checking out, after conversing with them for a while, and checked out these maps. And they saw that they had these marks. Let me zoom in a little. So you can see that there are marks here. There's I described these as being measurements about how wide the thinnest point of each of these channels were. There were X's in a couple of the channels and dots in some coves. The players deduced that these the dots made for good landing points. From what they know, from what they could see on the map, it's high hills and stuff, so they could get a ship up close to shore and drop a gangplank on a rock or the hillside and get goods off, good candidates for just unloading ships and whatnot. But their one question is why these have measurements, right? Why is this circled? So that's kind of the question they left off with these maps. Also, they did not return the maps, so they stole presumably weeks or months of work and just took off. They did not return those maps. So whatever their project is, that has delayed them a decent amount. And then they kind of finished it there. They didn't interrogate these guys super thoroughly. Aside from that, they just got that information, stole the maps, and took off. They didn't bother checking out this circle. They're like, "No, we already talked to a group. The next group's gonna say the same thing, and we're on a time crunch. We have 1 to 2 people who are infected, to 3, but everyone just thinks Ludwig the Goblin Alchemist is chugging concoctions and not actually turning into a werewolf. So at least one person is definitely infected, so they want to get back to Eden before the next full moon. They have a deadline in their mind. So they went on to the next mission, which was to check out the fortifications here. And, like, skipped the circle entirely. And we can take a look at those fortifications. The adventure did not progress such that the cartographers were here. So this was empty when they arrived. And they spent a long time checking this out, actually. Like, I didn't think, like... Alright, so the mission was, check the trebuchets in the towers, see that they're in good condition. They weren't. It's like they're weathered, and they need repairs. They've just been sitting here for ages without being touched in, like, the open, open rain, open wind. Like, it's like rotted wood, They were in rough shape. So they checked that out, that was fine. And then, yeah, it's the party's fort now, they claimed it. It's something like that. It's still, they know who is in possession and ownership of the fort. They know that it's Eden's fort. And, like, I think you're probably right that they would have just taken it over. They would have just claimed it and moved in if it weren't for the fact that, like, the doors further into the keep are just locked. Hello, Cam. Welcome. You're catching kind of the tail end of the recap here. I'm glad you're stopping by. We'll move on to the DM prep stuff shortly. Yeah. So, they were checking out this, they're like, we're here, let's spend some time looking around, and they, like, got a good layout of these ramparts on the outside. And then they got to this door, and they're like, well, alright, so this is locked, how do we, like, these doors don't even have locks, they're, like, locked from the inside, basically. This door, they're like, how do we get in? Eve tried to pick the lock and failed. It was like a higher quality lock than Eve has been picking later. It's like, I described it as your dad's a councilman. It's a lock like he might have on, like, his study or something, or, like the front gate. Like, it's not a chump lock. It's not a low quality cheap lock. This is some fine craftsmanship. And then and then Sonus, the sorcerer warrior, comes in. He's like, oh, I got this, don't you worry one bit. And he, like, fires off a hydraulic push, tilted to be a, like, wind push with his the way his elemental sorcerer bloodline works, and it just bounced off this door. Bounced off the door, knocked him on the floor, he crit, so it did a bunch of damage to him, and he just sat there for a while, like, catching his breath as everyone was like, oh, well, okay, so this is enchanted, that's not gonna work. And at that point, he his attack roll crit the door, and the door just, like, bounced his spell back. And Solus was like, okay, well, I've actually heard rumors, I probably should have mentioned this before, sorry, I heard rumors that the Emperor used to, like, when he was alive, he would come here. We don't really know, no one really knows what he would do here. It's just stories from, like, the Presidia, the Emperor's Guard soldiers. They would escort him, like, within a couple of miles of here. He would, like, come the rest of the way himself, do whatever for a couple of days, and then come back to his escort. And so they're like, oh, okay, so the Emperor was here. He obviously, like, enchanted this door. That's a little serious business. Okay, so we can't break in. And Eve was like, well, let's see if we can buy it. Let's go talk to Antonia Baird, head of the Green Stags. Let's just go buy this castle. And so, yeah, they called it there after looking around. The other thing, I guess, is, like, they did some detecting magic, which was technically outside of range of this door, but not, as a player, they kind of knew that. But as a character, they're like, oh, well, I guess that could have picked this up. But it was like Solus and Eve and Sonus were standing here. They did detect magic. They detected new magical auras, and could not figure out what that was. So I guess we'll we'll see if they figure that out in the future. And yeah, having done all of that, which took a while, I wasn't really looking at the clock, but it must have taken at least an hour and a half, close to, like, they were talking about what they would do with this castle, how to deal with it, like, if they wanted it. They were talking about it for a long time, so that was cool and unexpected. Like, I didn't think it would go that direction, but I think I planted the seed of strongholds and followers in their mind already by mentioning it a couple sessions ago, So I think it's like my job to go read that book now. I think they want a stronghold, so this might be where the party headquarters in the future. Was there anything else progressive in the fort? Like, yeah, they couldn't, they couldn't get inside, so they can't see deeper in the fort where all the good stuff is. Like, out here, basically anyone can get here. So they just found, like, there's some rice. There's, like, moldy, like, dust bread, destroyed bread, like, a bunch of salt. That's been, like, salt that has been water damaged or whatever. It's, like, clumping together. Water damage is the wrong word, but clumped together. It's not so granular anymore. Because it's been, like, dissolved and just gonna move on while I can't think of that word. Was there anything else progressive in the fort, or did they just talk about it? Yeah, they basically just talked about it, and I was like, okay, I need to look up. I need to figure out how much a fort is gonna cost you guys. I'm feeling like something interesting could have been accessible here. So maybe, yeah, like if they got inside, I would have had to kind of on the fly think of some cool stuff. Like the Emperor, I seated, like, Emperor was doing stuff here. So if they actually got inside, I would have had to go like, okay, well, what was that stuff? But it's not ready to go. It would have been entirely off the top of my head. Like I have some ideas, but like we talked about the Magitech cannon just around. Yeah, there wasn't too much to find. At least, not that I had seated and not that they asked for. They could have, they asked if there was like a path leading higher up the trail, and I was like, nah, not really. They could like come up the hill from the far other direction and like come down, but there's not a path here to get higher up. The path leads to this fort and nothing else. And yeah, they also know that it's like a very thin path. It's like a 2-person wide path in a lot of places, so it's like hard to get marched on by an army. So yeah, that was about it for the fort. And then they headed on back to the boat. They basically said, yeah, we're going to head to Castel next. And I was like, okay, cool. We can just teleport there, start next session, and then we'll like start moving on towards Eden, which is like, I think, yeah, that's basically all the recapping I had to do. It was a fast, wasn't a fast session. It was the same length of time as all the other sessions that don't go long. But, a lot of stuff happened it was like very boom, 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 very speedy, high velocity in comparison to usual. Like, we talked about how I expected them to burn through some of the dungeons, and then like some parts of it took like 2 days. I'm not used to the party like going through so much of my stuff at once, so now we've got some work to do.